A garage? He left me a garage? Robert, my God.
I never imagined my 68th birthday would find me shivering in an abandoned garage, surrounded by the sour tang of motor oil and the weight of forgotten years. Yet here I was, a suitcase at my side, fumbling with a key that felt foreign in my trembling hands. My eyes blurred with tears, but his words still struck with cruel precision. "You're just a useless old woman, Mom. What would you even do with a real inheritance?" Dad knew that. The metal scraped reluctantly as I slid the key into the rusted padlock. The ancient door gave a low, aching groan as I pushed it open, the darkness inside swallowing me whole until my flashlight cut a narrow path through the dust and silence. And then my breath caught. My heart lurched. What the beam revealed was impossible. This couldn't be what Robert had meant. This couldn't be the legacy of 42 years of marriage. A garage, just a garage. But let me take you back. You need to understand how I ended up here homeless, heartbroken, and clutching the fractured remains of my life on the day I should have been blowing out candles. The day had begun in the polished wood-paneled office of Mr. Hoffman, our family attorney for decades. Jonathan sat beside me, immaculate in his tailored suit, while I clutched my black funeral dress around me like a shroud. It had only been 3 weeks since I buried my husband. Hoffman adjusted his glasses nervously, a flicker of something like guilt in his eyes. "Before I begin," he said, voice thin, "I want to assure you that everything in this will is legally binding and exactly as Mr. Campbell instructed." Looking back, I should have heard the warning in that sentence. The words blurred together after that, but certain phrases struck like blows. To my son, Jonathan Campbell, I leave our penthouse residence in Los Angeles and my primary investment portfolio. And then, as if tossed carelessly into the shadows, to my beloved wife, Susan Campbell, I leave the property located at 1420 Industrial Parkway, the garage and its contents. A garage. Jonathan's grief-shaded face cracked into triumph. His hand gripped my shoulder just a fraction too hard, his whisper dripping poison. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll make sure you're taken care of." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The words circled like vultures in my mind. A garage. That evening, when Jonathan drove me back to what I still dared to think of as our home, the penthouse Robert and I had shared for 15 years, I thought I would find safety. Instead, my son set my single suitcase in the entryway like a parcel to be discarded. "I think it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay, Mom," he said, his tone rehearsed businesslike. I stared at him, my world splitting. "What do you mean? The penthouse is mine now. It's in the will." "It's mine," Jonathan replied smoothly. "Dad made that perfectly clear. I have colleagues coming tomorrow, planning to turn Dad's study into a home office. I need to start making changes." My voice broke, small, pleading. "But where am I supposed to go?" He shrugged, that cruel laugh escaping for the first time. "You could stay with Aunt Helen, or there's always that garage Dad left you. Why he gave you that dump is beyond me. What are you going to do? Open a mechanic shop at your age?" Something in me shattered. "Jonathan," I whispered, gripping the back of a chair to steady myself. "This is my home, your father and I." "It's not your home anymore." He cut me off, voice sharp, final. "It's mine." And then the words that would haunt me as I drove through the city's empty streets, until my headlights landed on that forgotten garage door in the industrial district. "You're just a useless old woman, Mom. What would you even do with a real inheritance?" So here I was, on my birthday, in the dark, with only a key, a suitcase, and a husband's riddle. And when I stepped inside, expecting rot and rust and broken tools, I found instead 3 ghostly shapes beneath fitted covers. The beam of my flashlight fell on gleaming chrome, the unmistakable silver grille of a vintage Aston Martin. My knees nearly buckled. I pulled the cover back with shaking hands, and there it stood. A 1,964 dB 5 inches, pristine silver birch, shining like it had rolled straight from a James Bond film. "Robert," I whispered into the silence. One by one, I uncovered them. A deep blue 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, flawless, its chrome details flashing like constellations, and then a scarlet 1967 Ferrari 275 GTB4, its color as rich as the wine Robert ordered on our anniversaries. Each had its own leather portfolio of documents, proof, history, value beyond anything I could comprehend. These weren't cars. They were treasures. And then my eyes found the envelope, taped to the wall beside a light switch, my name written in Robert's hand. I flicked the switch, and the garage came alive with brilliant light, revealing not decay but a sanctuary. Climate control, polished floors, security systems, precision. My heart thundered. I tore open the envelope, Robert's handwriting spilling into my hands. My dearest Susan, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've found my final gift to you. In the safe behind the photograph of us in Venice, combination is our anniversary. You'll find documentation for several investment properties I've acquired over the past 6 years, all placed in a living trust that transferred to your name upon my death. You'll also find banking information for accounts that should provide you with comfortable income for the rest of your life. My hands shook so badly I had to set the letter down for a brooded moment. There was a safe. I looked around and spotted the framed photo on the wall, Robert and me on the Rialto Bridge, laughing as a street musician serenaded us during our 35th anniversary trip. I rose unsteadily and moved toward. The safe opened with a soft click when I entered our anniversary date. Inside, I found a thick portfolio and several USB drives neatly labeled. The top document in the portfolio was titled, Estate of Robert Campbell, Complete Asset Inventory for Susan Campbell. I flipped it open and immediately had to sit down again, as columns of numbers and property descriptions swam before my round eyes. Apartment buildings in Seattle, commercial property in Chicago, a small vineyard in Northern California, stock, portfolios, bonds, private equity investments. The total value at the bottom of the page made my ears ring. With numbed fingers, I returned to Robert's letter. I know this is overwhelming, and I'm sorry for keeping all of this from you. At first, it was just a project to channel my anxiety about the future. But as the portfolio grew, I realized revealing it prematurely might put it at risk if Jonathan discovered the extent of these holdings. You're probably wondering why I didn't simply protect you through more conventional means. The truth is, I wanted to give Jonathan a chance to show his true character. Perhaps faced with his inheritance and responsibility for you, he would rise to become the man we raised him to be. If he's proven himself worthy, if he's ensured your comfort and security, then perhaps you might choose to share some of this wealth with him. But if he has revealed a different nature, well then this legacy is your protection against that reality. Your independence, your freedom. I had to stop reading again as a sob escaped me. Robert had known. He had anticipated exactly what would happen, had foreseen how Jonathan would react to gaining control of the penthouse. I've always believed that character reveals itself most clearly at moments of inheritance, both what we receive and what we believe we deserve. Jonathan is receiving a test as much as an inheritance, and you, my love, are receiving the means to live the remainder of your life exactly as you choose, beholden to no one. All my love, now and always, Robert. I clutched the letter to my chest, tears flowing, freely now. After 42 years of marriage, I thought I had known everything about my husband. Instead, it seemed I was only now discovering the true depth of his love and foresight. As I sat, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of automotive art, the irony wasn't lost on me. Just hours ago, my son had thrown me out of what I thought was my home, calling me a useless old woman while believing he had received the valuable bay inheritance. How wrong he had been about everything. I spent that first night on a leather sofa I discovered in a small adjoining office within the garage complex. It wasn't until morning that I fully appreciated the extent of Robert's preparations. The office contained a compact bathroom with shower, a mini refrigerator stocked with water and basic provisions, and even a small closet with several changes of clothes. in my size, tags still attached. My practical husband had anticipated I might need temporary shelter here. Daylight revealed more details I'd missed in my emotional state the night before. The garage wasn't some neglected industrial space, but a meticulously renovated facility with state-of-the-art security, climate control systems, and custom lighting designed to showcase the vehicles. What looked dilapidated from outside was intentional camouflage concealing the treasures within. After a press of aisle, simple breakfast of granola bars and bottled water, I called the number for Marcus Weatherby that Robert had included in his letter. Despite the early hour, he answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Campbell," he said, his British accent unmistakable. "I've been expecting your call. First, please accept my condolences for your loss." Robert was not just a client, but a friend. "Thank you, Mr. Weatherby," I replied, my voice still rough from crying. "I'm a bit overwhelmed. I only discovered the garage and its contents last night." "Yes, Robert mentioned you wouldn't know until after his passing. I'm happy to answer any questions and I assist however I can. Would you like me to come to the garage?" 2 hours later, a distinguished man in his 60s arrived in a modest sedan, parking carefully beside my old Toyota. Marcus Weatherby looked exactly as his voice had suggested. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a tweed jacket with leather patches at the elbows, and carrying a slim leather portfolio. "Mrs. Campbell," he said, extending his hand. "A pleasure to meet you, though I wish it were under happier circumstances." As we settled in the plan and in various office area with coffee from a thermos he'd brought, Marcus helped me begin to understand the scope of what Robert had created. "Your husband began acquiring these vehicles approximately 6 years ago," he explained, opening his portfolio. He was extraordinarily methodical in his approach. Each purchase was carefully researched for authenticity, provenance, and investment potential. "But why cars?" I asked, still struggling to connect this passion with the husband I thought I'd known completely. Robert never showed any particular interest in automobiles beyond our regular vehicles. Marcus smiled gently. He explained that to me once. He said cars were tangible, beautiful assets that brought joy simply by existing. Unlike stocks or bonds, they could be appreciated on multiple levels. As art, as engineering marvels, as historical artifacts, and as financial investments, he wanted to leave you something you could see and touch, not just numbers on a statement. My throat tightened at this insight into Robert's thinking. It was so like him, practical, yet deeply thoughtful. The collection is currently worth approximately $12 million, as Robert indicated in his letter. Marcus continued, but its value has been increasing steadily. These particular models are considered blue chip investments in the collector car world. "And what am I supposed to do with them?" I asked, gesturing toward the 3 gleaming vehicles. "Whatever you wish, Mrs. Campbell. You could sell them individually or as a collection. You could maintain them as investments. You could even drive them, though that would affect their value somewhat." He paused, studying me carefully. "There's no rush to decide." Robert paid for secure storage and maintenance for the next 5 years. After Marcus left, promising to return whenever I needed him, I sat in the quiet garage, contemplating my situation. Less than 24 hours ago, I'd believed myself to be essentially homeless, cast out by my son, and mysteriously disinherited by my husband. Now I was discovering I was a wealthy woman with options I'd never imagined, but I had nowhere to live except this peculiar garage with its hidden amenities. I spent the day going through the portfolio from the safe, gradually comprehending the extent of Robert's secret financial maneuvering. Beyond the cars, he had assembled an impressive collection of income-producing properties and investments, all carefully structured to transfer to me seamlessly upon his death. One document particularly caught my attention, the deed to a modest but lovely cottage in reporting, Carmel, a coastal town we had visited several times over the years and always loved. According to the paperwork, Robert had purchased it 4 years ago, fully furnished and ready for occupancy. I had a home, a real home, not just this garage, however valuable its contents. As evening approached, my phone rang, Jonathan's number flashing on the screen. I hesitated, then answered, curious what he might say after our last interaction. "Mom, where are you?" His voice held irritation rather than concern. "Aunt Helen said you haven't contacted her." "I'm fine, Jonathan," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I found somewhere to stay." "Well, I need you to come pick up the rest of your things from the penthouse. I'm having the interior designers start work tomorrow, and they need everything cleared out. No apology, no acknowledgement of his cruelty, just more demands and dismissal." "I see," I said, a strange calm settling over me. "And when would be convenient for you?" "Tomorrow morning before 9. I have meetings all day." I thought about the document spread before me. Proof of Robert's careful planning and deep love. I thought about the son who could so casually discard his mother when she became inconvenient, and I made a decision. "I'll be there," I said. After hanging up, I called Marcus back and asked if he could recommend a good attorney specializing in estate matters. By the time night fell, I had appointments scheduled with both legal counsel and a financial advisor for the following afternoon. I spent my second night in the garage office more comfortably than the first, my mind no longer reeling with shock, but instead methodically planning my next steps. I thought of Robert, imagining him carefully orchestrating this elaborate protection for me, all while keeping it secret to shield it from Jonathan's potential interference. "You knew him better than I did," I whispered to Robert's memory as I drifted toward sleep. Our own son. The realization was painful, but clarifying. Robert's unusual will hadn't been a rejection of me, but an act of profound love and foresight. He'd sacrificed having me share in his secret project during his final years to ensure I would be truly independent after he was gone. Tomorrow I would face Jonathan one more time, collect whatever personal treasures remained in what had been our home, and then begin my new life, one that Robert had carefully crafted for me from the shadows. As I fell asleep, I found myself wondering what expression would cross Jonathan's face if he knew what was housed in the worthless garage he had mocked. But that revelation, if it ever came, would be on my terms and my timeline. For now, I had the advantage of being underestimated. A useless old woman with a secret fortune and a payless, growing determination to honor Robert's final gift by using it wisely. The next morning, I arrived at the penthouse precisely at 8:45. Having taken care with my appearance in a way I hadn't bothered with for weeks, I wore one of the new outfits from the garage closet, a simple but elegant pantsuit in navy that fit surprisingly well, and had styled my hair carefully. Small rebellions, perhaps, but they helped fortify me for the confrontation ahead. Jonathan opened the door with phone in hand, barely glancing up as I entered. What had been my home for 15 years? The space already felt different, emptier, colder somehow. Several of my decorative pieces were missing, and the family photos that had lined the hallway had been removed, leaving ghostly rectangular marks on the walls. "Finally," he said, tucking his phone into his pocket. "I've boxed up most of your personal stuff. The designers will be here at 9:30, so we need to be efficient." No greeting, no inquiry about where I'd spent the night after he'd thrown me out of my home. Just immediate focus on his own convenience. "Good morning to you too, Jonathan," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "I see you've already started redecorating," he shrugged, leading me toward the master bedroom, where several cardboard boxes sat stacked on what had been my side of the bed. No point waiting. The place needs a complete update to maximize its value. "Its value?" I echoed. "You're planning to sell it eventually. It's oversized for one person, and the market's hot right now. I figure I'll renovate, enjoy it for a year or so, then flip it for a substantial profit." The casual dismissal of the home Robert and I had created together stung, but I merely nodded. "I see." "And Robert's things?" Jonathan gestured vaguely toward more boxes in the corner. I kept the Rolex in his cufflink collection. The rest is just clothes and old man stuff. You can take whatever you want. The rest is going to donation. Old man stuff, I repeated softly, approaching the boxes. Inside the first one, I found Robert's beloved books, his collection of vintage fountain pens, the sweater I'd given him last Christmas that still faintly carried his scent. Each item a piece of the man I'd loved, now designated as worthless by our son. I methodically began sorting through the boxes, setting aside items precious to me, while Jonathan paced impatiently, checking his watch every few minutes. "Can't you hurry this up?" he finally snapped. "It's just stuff, Mom. You don't even have a place to store it all." I looked up at him, really seeing the man my son had become. Handsome like his father, but with none of Robert's warmth or compassion in his eyes. When had that happened? When had ambition and materialism hollowed him out so completely? "I have a place," I said, quietly, "and I'll take as much time as I need. These aren't just possessions, Jonathan. They're memories," he rolled his eyes. "Fine, I have calls to make. Just be finished by 9:30. He strode from the room without a backward glance. As I continued carefully selecting items to take with me, I found myself moving this through stages of grief, not just for Robert, but for the son I thought I'd raised. Had he always been this cold, this dismissive? Had I simply refused to see it, making excuses for increasingly callous behavior over the years? Robert, I had seen it clearly, though, clearly enough to create an elaborate plan to protect me from our own child. When I finished selecting what mattered most to me, I found Jonathan in what had been Robert's study, now half emptied of its contents. My husband's beautiful mahogany desk, the one he'd inherited from his father, was gone, replaced by some sleek glass and chrome monstrosity that looked more like a spacecraft than furniture. "I'm finished," I announced, from the doorway. Jonathan glanced up from his laptop. "Great. Do you need help carrying things down? I can call the doorman." "That would be appreciated. Thank you." I hesitated, then added, "I'd like to say a proper goodbye to the place if you don't mind. 15 years of memories deserves a few moments of reflection." Something flickered in his expression. Irritation, impatience, perhaps a fleeting touch of guilt, but he nodded. "Sure, whatever. Just lock up when you leave. I need to meet the designers downstairs." He brushed past me without another word, leaving me alone in the emptying penthouse. I took my time walking through each room, saying silent farewells to the space where Robert and I had spent our later years together. In our bedroom, I opened the closet one last time, running my Robert and I bad fingers along the few remaining items of Robert's clothing that Jonathan hadn't yet boxed up. At the back of the closet, I noticed something. Robert's old leather messenger bag, pushed into a corner as if hastily hidden. I pulled it out, unzipping it to find a sealed envelope inside with my name written on it along with a note. "If you find this, Susan, it's an extra copy of everything in the garage safe, just in case. My clever, thorough husband, creating backups to his backups." I tucked the envelope securely into my purse, an unexpected treasure from this final visit. When the doorman had helped load my selected possessions into my car, I took one last look at the building before driving away. I felt a strange mixture of loss and liberation. The penthouse had been our home, filled with memories, both beautiful and painful, but it had never truly been mine in the way Robert had intended the garage and its contents to be. I drove directly to the law offices of Patricia Winters, the attorney Marcus had recommended. She was a striking woman in her 50s, with keen eyes and an air of formidable competence that immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Campbell," she greeted me, shaking my hand firmly. "I've reviewed the documents you forwarded. Your husband created quite an extraordinary estate plan." "Yes," I agreed, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I'm still trying to comprehend it all. From what I can see, Everything is in impeccable order. The trust structures are sound, the transfers clean. He clearly worked with excellent counsel. She leaned forward slightly. What I'd like to understand is what you hope to achieve now. I considered her question carefully. I need to secure my future, find a permanent place to live, understand my financial position completely. I paused, then added, and I need to determine how to handle my relationship with my son going forward. Patricia nodded. From what you've shared about recent events, that last point may be the most complicated. Have you decided whether to tell him about the extent of your inheritance? Not yet, I admitted. Part of me wants him to continue believing I have nothing but a worthless garage. Let him live with the consequences of his actions and attitudes. But I'm not sure that's the right approach either. There's no rush to decide, she assured me. For now, let's focus on getting you settled and secure. I suggest you visit the Carmel property as soon as possible. If it meets your needs, you can begin transitioning there immediately. By the end of our 2-hour meeting, I had a clear action plan. Visit the cottage in Carmel, meet with the financial team that had been managing Robert's secret investments, and take my time making decisions about the cars and other assets. As I left Patricia's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. Designers love the space. Going with a complete gut renovation. Dropped your old photo albums at Helen's place since. You didn't take them. No inquiry about whether I wanted those family photos. No concern about where I was staying or how. I was managing, just casual disposal of more memories he deemed worthless. I didn't respond. Instead, I called to book a hotel in Carmel for that night. It was time to see the home Robert had prepared for me, the real inheritance he had intended all along. As I drove away from the city toward the coastal highway, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time since Robert's death, I wasn't merely reacting to loss and shock. I was moving, purposefully toward something new. Whatever lay ahead in Carmel, whatever decisions awaited regarding Jonathan and the fortune Robert had secretly built, I would face them on my own terms. The useless old woman my son had dismissed was finding her strength 1 mile at a time. The coastal drive to Carmel soothed something in my soul that had been raw since Robert's death. As Highway 1 wound along the cliffs, offering glimpses of the Pacific's vast blue expanse, I felt myself breathing more deeply than I had in weeks. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything, as if nature itself were welcoming me to this new chapter. I followed the GPS directions through Carmel's charming downtown, with its fairy tale cottages and upscale boutiques, then down tree-lined streets, increasingly residential in character. When the navigation announced arriving at destination, I pulled up before a modest stone cottage partially hidden behind mature cypress trees. The property wasn't large or ostentatious, but it radiated charm and privacy. A natural wood gate led to a flagstone path that wound through a small but beautifully maintained garden. With the key from the document packet, I unlocked the Dutch door and stepped inside. Interior stopped me in my tracks. Every detail seemed chosen specifically with me in mind. The living room featured built-in bookshelves surrounding a stone fireplace with comfortable seating and the colors and styles I'd always preferred. Natural light poured through multi-paneled windows, illuminating hardwood floors covered with hand-woven rugs and subtle patterns. I moved through the space in wonder. The kitchen, it was updated but traditional, with a small breakfast nook overlooking the garden. The single bedroom was cozy rather than large, but it opened onto a private patio with a glimpse of the ocean between neighboring properties. But it was the small study off the living room that finally broke through my composure. There, above a simple writing desk, hung a painting I recognized instantly, a watercolor of the Venice Canal, where Robert had proposed, created by a street artist all those decades ago. We'd lost the original in a move years before, but here was a perfect replica, as if Robert had commissioned it from my memory. The tears came then, not the desperate sobs of recent weeks, but a gentler release. Robert had created this space for me with such care, such attention to the things that would bring me comfort and joy. Even in death, He was caring for me in ways I was only beginning to understand. I sank into a window seat, cushioned in my favorite shade of blue, watching the last light of day filter through the trees. For the first time since receiving news of the will, I felt truly at home. A soft knock at the door roused me from contemplation. Opening it, I found an elegant woman in her 70s, standing on my doorstep, a covered dish in her hands. "Hello," she said warmly. "You must be Susan. I'm Margaret Winters, your neighbor 2 doors down. Robert asked me to keep an eye out for when you arrived." I blinked in surprise. "You knew Robert?" She nodded, offering the dish. "He visited several times over the past few years, preparing the cottage. I'm one of the few people who knew about his project. He made me promise not to reach out until you came to claim the place." Her eyes crinkled. Kindly. "It's just a simple casserole. I thought you might not want to worry about cooking your first night here." I accepted the dish, oddly touched by this continuation of Robert's care. "Thank you. Would you like to come in? Over tea?" In the kitchen, Margaret shared details that filled more gaps in my understanding. "Robert was so meticulous about getting everything right," she explained. "He'd bring photos of your home in the city, trying to capture your aesthetic while creating something that belonged here in Carmel. I had no idea he was doing any of this," I admitted. "He kept it completely secret." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "He mentioned that said it was for your protection, though." He didn't elaborate. She studied me with gentle directness. "He did say that when you finally came, you might need a friend, someone who understood what it was to rebuild a life after loss. You've lost someone too. My husband 8 years ago." She smiled softly. "It gets different, if not easier. Having good neighbors helps." By the time Margaret left, promising to introduce me to others in the community when I felt ready, I had a deeper appreciation for Robert's thoroughness. He hadn't just provided me with financial security and a physical home. He'd thought about my emotional and social needs as well. That night, I slept in the cottage's comfortable bedroom, lulled by the distant sound of waves and the gentle tick of a grandfather clock in the hallway that reminded me of the one in my childhood home. For the first time since Robert's passing, my sleep was deep and untroubled. The next morning, I explored the cottage more thoroughly in daylight. In the study desk, I found a folder containing all the practical information I might need, the names of local doctors, service providers, community resources, even a membership to the local library already paid for in my name. I also discovered a handwritten note tucked into the desk, dated just 3 months before Robert died. "My dearest Susan, if you're reading this, you found make your way to Carmel and the home I hope brings you peace and joy. I wish more than anything that I could be sharing this next chapter with you, watching the sunset from the garden, walking the beach in the early morning fog. I know this transition can't be easy. You're facing enormous changes, some by choice and some by circumstance beyond your control. But I've always admired your resilience, even when you doubted it. Yourself. The cottage is yours to use however you wish, as a permanent home, a getaway, or even to sell if it doesn't suit you. My only hope is that it offers you a fresh start, free from obligations or expectations that don't serve your happiness. I love you always, Robert." I pressed the paper to my chest, feeling simultaneously bereft and profoundly loved. Even now, Robert was giving me permission to chart my own course, to make decisions based on my own needs rather than obligations to his memory. Over the next 3 days, I settled into a gentle rhythm of exploration, walking the beach in the mornings, getting to know the town's shops and cafes, meeting a few neighbors Margaret introduced me to. Each evening, I returned to the cottage that increasingly felt like mine, not just a place Robert had prepared. On the 4th day, as I was enjoying morning coffee in the garden, my phone rang with a familiar number. "Jonathan." I hesitated before answering, conscious of how our last interaction had affected me. "Hello, Jonathan," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Mom, where are you?" His voice held that familiar note of impatience. "Aunt Helen said you haven't been staying with her." And you're not answering at your friend Ruth's place either. I took a slow sip of coffee before responding. I'm taking some time for myself, Jonathan. I found a place to stay. Now, what does that mean? What place? You can't just disappear like this. I'm not discussing my whereabouts right now, I replied, surprised by my own firmness. Was there something specific you needed? A pause. Then his voice shifted to what I recognized as his business negotiation tone. Actually, yes. I've been going through Dad's papers more thoroughly, and I found some references to additional investments that weren't covered in the will reading. I think there might be accounts or properties I don't know about yet. My heart beat faster, but I kept my voice steady. Oh, what kind of references? Nothing specific, just notes about meetings with financial advisors I don't recognize. Some cryptic comments about securing future assets. I thought you might know something about it. Your father handled most of our finances, I said, which was true enough. If there are additional assets, I'm sure Mr. Hoffman would have mentioned them. Maybe, Jonathan said, sounding unconvinced. Listen, as you coming back to the city? We should discuss this in person. I've got the penthouse torn apart for renovations, but we could meet somewhere. I'm not sure when I'll be back, I replied honestly. I need this time away. His frustration was palpable, even through the phone. Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just wander off without telling anyone where you are. What if there's an emergency? What if something happens to you? I'm perfectly fine, Jonathan. I'm not wandering, and I'm not alone. I'm simply taking space to process everything that's happened. This isn't like you, he said, accusation creeping into his tone. First, Dad leaves you practically nothing in the will. Then, you disappear without a word. People will talk. I almost laughed at the irony. Let them talk, Jonathan. I'm beyond caring about appearances at this point. After ending the call with vague assurances that I'd be in touch when I did, I was ready. I sat in the garden considering this new development. Jonathan was getting suspicious, looking for assets he believed were rightfully his. How long before he discovered the truth? And when he did, what would I do? The question Robert had posed in his letter loomed larger with each passing day. Had Jonathan proven himself worthy of sharing in this unexpected wealth? So far, his actions had only confirmed Robert's concerns about his character. But people could change, couldn't they? The son I remembered from years ago, the one with compassion and genuine warmth, was he still in there, somewhere beneath layers of ambition and entitlement? I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time, I felt strong enough to wait for them to emerge. The cottage, like Robert's love, had given me not just shelter, but something I'd been missing for too long. The space and security to trust my own judgment again. 2 weeks after settling into the Carmel Cottage, I'd established a comfortable routine that felt both novel and natural. Mornings began with coffee in the garden or walks along the beach when fog didn't shroud the coast. Afternoons were dedicated to practical matters, meeting with financial advisors, learning about the properties Robert had acquired, understanding my new circumstances. I'd begun to appreciate the extent of Robert's planning. The cottage was just the most personal aspect of a comprehensive strategy to ensure my independence. The income properties generated substantial monthly revenue, while the investment portfolios were conservatively managed for long-term stability rather than aggressive growth. Your husband was unusually thorough, remarked Howard Lent, the financial advisor who had worked secretly with Robert. Most clients focus primarily on asset accumulation. Robert was equally concerned with creating systems for management that wouldn't burden you with daily decisions unless you wanted that involvement. I was in Howard's Terry office reviewing quarterly statements for the various trusts Robert had established. He knew I didn't have his head for financial intricacies. I acknowledged. Howard smiled. He mentioned that, but he also said you had excellent judgment about people and an intuitive understanding of value that he respected enormously. This glimpse of how Robert had spoken about me to others was unexpectedly moving. Even as he'd kept his plan secret, he'd maintained his faith in my capabilities. There is one matter we should discuss, Howard continued, his tone shifting slightly. We've received inquiries from a Jonathan Campbell, claiming to be conducting a review of his late father's financial affairs. My hands tensed around my teacup. My son? What exactly did he want to know? He was fishing for information about additional accounts or investments beyond what was disclosed in the will. I followed protocol and explained that client confidentiality prevents me from discussing any accounts without proper authorization. Thank you, I said, relief evident in my voice. Jonathan received his inheritance as specified in the will. Robert's intentions regarding the rest were quite clear. Howard nodded. Well, continue maintaining that position, but you should be aware he's been persistent, contacting several firms associated with your husband's investments. This wasn't surprising. Jonathan had always been tenacious when pursuing something he wanted, a quality that had served him well in business, but manifested as entitlement in personal matters. I appreciate the warning, I told Howard. I'm still determining how to handle the situation with my son. Driving back to Carmel, I contemplated the growing evidence of Jonathan's investigation. His suspicions, initially vague, were clearly solidifying into active pursuit. How long before he discovered the garage and its contents? Before he learned about the cottage? Before he realized the extent of what Robert had kept from him? And perhaps more importantly, what would I do when that happened? I was still pondering these questions when I arrived at the cottage to find an unfamiliar luxury SUV parked outside. My heart sank as I recognized the personalized license plate. J. Campbell. Jonathan stood on my doorstep, arms crossed, expression a mixture of triumph and accusation. Found you, he said as I approached. Interesting place you've got here, Mom. When were you planning to mention it? I kept my voice calm despite my racing pulse. Hello, Jonathan. This is a surprise. I bet it is, he replied, glancing pointedly at the cottage. Care to explain how you're suddenly a property owner in one of California's most expensive coastal towns? I unlocked the door, gesturing him inside. No point in creating a scene for the neighbors. I think you'd better come in. Jonathan followed, his critical gaze taking in every detail of the cottage interior. I could almost see him calculating its value, measuring its worth against his expectations. Charming, he said, the words somehow rendered insulting by his tone. So, this is why you've been dodging my calls. You've been hiding out in a secret vacation home. I haven't been hiding. Jonathan, I've been processing enormous changes and deciding how to move forward. I set my purse down and faced to him directly. How did you find this place? He smiled without warmth. I'm not completely incompetent, Mom. When you disappeared, I hired a private investigator to locate you. Basic welfare check on an elderly parent who vanished after showing signs of confusion following her husband's death. The calculated manipulation of his approach, casting me as potentially senile to justify invasive investigation, struck like a physical blow. I see. And this investigator tracked me here after some effort. Yes. The property records were interesting reading. Apparently, Dad purchased this place 4 years ago but kept it out of cracks. His regular accounts. Jonathan's eyes narrowed, which made me wonder what else he might have hidden. I moved to the kitchen, filling the kettle for tea, a small action to buy myself time. Robert made his decisions about the will for his own reasons. The cottage was meant to be a surprise. Jonathan followed, leaning against the door frame. A surprise? He repeated flatly. Like that worthless garage in the industrial district? Another one of Dad's surprises. My hand stilled on the kettle. He knew about the garage. The question was, how much did he know about what it contained? The garage was part of his estate, I said carefully. Yes, the mysterious garage that no one could explain. Jonathan's voice hardened. I visited it yesterday, Mom. Door was locked, but the windows, while dirty, still allowed a peek inside when the light was right. I kept my expression neutral, though my heart hammered painfully. And then I saw enough to know there are cars in there. Vintage cars? From what little I could make out. His jaw tightened. Cars worth significantly more than that penthouse Dad left me. The penthouse that comes with maintenance fees I can barely afford, since most of the liquid assets went into trust funds I can't access. So there it was. Jonathan had discovered part of the truth, but not its full extent. He'd seen the cars, but likely didn't realize their true value or know about the additional properties and investments. Your father made his choices, Jonathan. The penthouse and investment portfolio he left you are substantial gifts. Gifts? He scoffed. The penthouse needs hundreds of thousands in repairs that I discovered, only after starting renovations. The investment portfolio barely covers my existing commitments. Meanwhile, you're living in a Carmel Cottage and apparently own a collection of classic cars worth God knows how much. I poured boiling water into the teapot, the familiar ritual steadying my nerves. What exactly do you want from me, Jonathan? The truth would be a start, he replied. Did you know about these secret assets all along? Were you and Dad planning this manipulation of the inheritance? No, I said firmly, meeting in his gaze. I knew nothing about the cottage or the garage until after Robert died. I was as surprised as you are now. This admission seemed to catch him off guard. Then why keep it from me these past weeks? Why disappear instead of explaining? Because I needed time to understand it myself, I answered honestly, and because your behavior after the will reading didn't exactly invite confidence or collaboration. He flinched slightly, then recovered. I was upset, finding out Dad had essentially disinherited me in favor of you. Disinherited you? I interrupted, disbelief coloring my voice. He left you a multi-million-dollar penthouse and investment accounts worth millions more. A fraction of what he apparently had hidden away. Jonathan's voice rose. Those cars alone are worth what? Jonathan? I challenged. How would you know their value unless you've been investigating far more thoroughly than you're admitting? He had the grace to look momentarily abashed. I have contacts in the collector car world. Made some discreet inquiries based on what little I could see. Of course you did, I murmured, suddenly weary of the deception and counter-deception. Would you like some tea? If we're going to have this conversation, we might as well be civilized about it. This mundane offer seemed to deflate some of his righteous anger. He nodded, taking a seat at the breakfast nook while I prepared 2 cups. As we sat facing each other across the small table, I saw something beneath Jonathan's indignation that I hadn't noticed before, a vulnerability, perhaps even fear, for all his bluster about being cheated out of his rightful inheritance. Was there something more fundamental driving his pursuit? Jonathan, I began, my tone gentler, why does this matter so much to you? You have a successful career, a beautiful home, financial security most people never achieve. What difference does it make if Robert left additional assets to me? He stared into his teacup, avoiding my gaze. It's not about the money. Not really. Then what is it about? When he finally looked up, I glimpsed the child he had once been, uncertain, seeking approval. It's about what it means. Dad trusted you with these assets, these secrets. He didn't trust me. And there it was, the core. Wound beneath the entitlement and anger, not greed but rejection. In his mind, Robert's careful planning represented not protection for me, but lack of faith in him. Oh, Jonathan, I sighed. It wasn't about trust or lack thereof. Your father was trying to create security for both of us in different ways. By hiding millions in assets from me, his bitterness returned. By leaving you secretly wealthy while making it seem like he'd left you nothing but a worthless garage. I took a careful sip of tea, considering how much to reveal. The moment had come sooner than I'd expected, forcing a decision I wasn't fully prepared to make. How much of Robert's reasoning should I share? How much of the truth could Jonathan bear to hear? The late afternoon light slanted through the cottage windows, casting long shadows across the kitchen table where Jonathan and I sat in uneasy silence. I studied my son's face, the familiar features that echoed Robert's, yet somehow lacked the compassion that had always softened my husband's expression. There's a letter, I said finally. "From your father. It explains his decisions more clearly than I could." Jonathan's posture stiffened. "A letter? You've had a letter explaining all this and didn't think to share it? It was addressed to me, Jonathan, and given how you treated me after the will." Reading, I wasn't exactly eager to share something so personal. I met his gaze steadily. "You called me a useless old woman and threw me out of my home." His eyes flickered away, a hint of discomfort crossing his face. I was upset. People say things they don't mean when they're emotional. Do they? I asked quietly. Or do moments of high emotion simply reveal what's normally kept hidden? Rather than answering, Jonathan gestured impatiently. "This letter? Do. Now you have it here?" I rose and went to the study, retrieving both Robert's original letter from the garage and the copy I'd found in his messenger bag. Returning to the kitchen, I hesitated before handing him the copy. "Before you read this, I want you to understand something. Your father loved you, Jonathan. Nothing in his actions was meant to hurt you, only to protect what he valued." "Let me be the judge of that," he replied, taking the letter with barely concealed eagerness. I watched as he read, his expression shifting from anticipation to disbelief, to something darker. His hands tightened on the paper, knuckles whitening as he reached the paragraphs addressing Robert's concerns about his character. When he finished, he set the letter down with deliberate care, as if afraid his control might shatter if he moved too quickly. "So," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "Dad thought I was, what? Too materialistic, too selfish to be trusted with the family wealth. He was concerned about how your values had changed over time," I corrected gently, "and about how you might handle having authority over my financial well-being. And his solution was to deceive me, to create this elaborate scheme making me think I got the valuable inheritance, while secretly leaving everything of real worth to you." His voice rose with each question, indignation building. If you have any idea how humiliating this is, Jonathan." He cut me off, standing so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. "You don't get to Jonathan me in that patronizing tone. Not after this. Dad manipulated me, tested me like some lab rat to see if I'd pass his twisted moral examination." I remained seated, refusing to match his emotional escalation. "Your father made the best decisions he could based on what he observed over years, not days or weeks. If his assessment seems harsh, perhaps that deserves reflection rather than rejection." He paced the small kitchen, tension radiating from every movement. "Reflection? You want me to reflect on being portrayed as some kind of heartless monster in my own father's eyes? That's not what the letter says," I pointed out. "It expresses concern about certain tendencies, not a fixed judgment of your entire character." Jonathan stopped pacing to stare at me incredulously. "Are you seriously defending this? He left you a fortune while setting me up to reveal my true nature, and apparently I failed his test spectacularly by expecting to actually receive what the will specified. There was no point arguing about his characterization. In a sense, he wasn't wrong. Robert had indeed created a situation designed to reveal character through action, and Jonathan's actions after the will reading had confirmed rather than disproved his father's concerns. "The question now," I said carefully, "is where we go from here." He laughed without humor. "Where we go? That's simple. As Robert Campbell's son and heir, I have every right to contest this arrangement. Hidden assets, secret, and trusts. It all smacks of deliberate attempt to circumvent normal inheritance. I had anticipated this." Reaction: "The legal structures your father created are impeccable, Jonathan. The assets were his to distribute as he saw fit, and he did so through proper channels, documented and legitimate. Contesting would be expensive, lengthy, and almost certainly futile. You sound awfully confident for someone who claimed to know nothing about finances," he shot back. "I've had several weeks to consult with excellent advisors," I replied evenly. "The same ones who helped of your father create these arrangements." Jonathan braced his hands against the counter, his back to me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. When he finally turned, his expression had shifted from anger to calculation. Look I recognized from negotiations I'd witnessed over the years. What if we reached a compromise? He suggested, his tone deliberately reasonable. A more equitable distribution that honors Dad's wishes while acknowledging my position. As his son, surely half of these assets. No, I interrupted, surprising us both, with my firmness. I'm not negotiating Robert's final wishes. The assets he left me aren't just about money, Jonathan. They represent his care, his foresight, his desire to ensure I would never be dependent on anyone's goodwill, including yours. So that's it, his voice hardened again. You keep everything justified by Dad's paranoid suspicions about me. I stood then, meeting him at eye level. What I choose to do with these assets going forward will depend on many factors, but your sense of entitlement to them isn't helping your case. My case, he scoffed. So I'm on trial now too. In a way, yes, I acknowledged, deciding complete honesty was necessary. Your father's letter gave me discretion about sharing these assets with you if you demonstrated certain qualities. Your behavior since his death, particularly toward me, will influence those decisions. The blunt assessment landed like a physical blow. Jonathan stared at me as if seeing a planned stranger. Perhaps he was. The compliant, accommodating mother he'd taken for granted had been replaced by someone with clear boundaries and expectations. You can't be serious, he finally managed. You're actually going to hold Dad's fortune hostage based on whether I passed some subjective character assessment. I'm going to honor the spirit of your father's wishes, I corrected, which included protecting these assets from being squandered, misused. He grabbed his car keys from the table. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Jonathan, I called as he headed for the door. Before you rush off to consult attorneys, consider something. What if your father was? Right? What if this inheritance, the visible, prestigious part, was exactly what you needed to recognize certain not love, truths about yourself? He paused at the threshold, not turning. Save the philosophical lessons, Mom. I've had enough Campbell family wisdom for one day. After the door slammed behind him, I sank back into my chair, emotional. Exhaustion washing over me. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as I'd feared, Jonathan focusing entirely on what he perceived as rightfully his, showing no real concern for my welfare or acknowledgement of his previous behavior. Yet beneath his indignation, I'd glimpsed something else, the hurt of a son who felt his father had judged him and found him wanting. That pain was real, even if his response to it was problematic. I made myself a fresh cup of tea and carried it to the garden, seeking comfort in the coastal breeze and late afternoon sunlight. Robert's letter had predicted this moment, had prepared me for Jonathan's reaction. What it hadn't prepared me for was the weight of becoming the arbiter of his character, of holding the power that Robert had entrusted to me. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Saw your son leave in quite a hurry. Everything okay? I'm making lasagna if you'd like tonight. The simple kindness brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Company would be wonderful, I replied. It's been a difficult afternoon. As I watched the sun begin its descent toward the Pacific, I contemplated the path ahead. Jonathan would almost certainly consult attorneys, though any legal challenge would ultimately prove futile. The real question was whether this confrontation would drive him further into entitlement and resentment, or whether, as Robert had hoped, it might eventually prompt genuine reflection and growth. Either way, I had decisions to make about the cars, about the properties, about how much to share with Jonathan and under what conditions. Robert had given me not just wealth, but responsibility, a final act of faith in Withtiden Inand, my judgment that both honored and burdened me. For now, though, I would have dinner with my new friend. I would continue establishing my life here in this peaceful cottage, and I would give Jonathan the space to process his anger, disappointment, hoping that somewhere beneath the entitled man he'd become, the thoughtful boy we'd raised might still exist, waiting to emerge. 3 months after Jonathan's angry departure from the cottage, Autumn arrived in Carmel, with subtle shifts, slightly cooler mornings, changing light that painted the coastline in softer hues, fewer tourists crowding the village streets. I had settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural, dividing my time between maintaining the cottage, exploring my new community, and managing the responsibilities that came with Robert's unexpected legacy. With Patricia Winter's guidance, I established a comfortable system for overseeing the various properties and investments. The cars remained in their secure garage, maintained by Marcus Weatherby's team through monthly visits. I'd even driven the Aston Martin once, a tentative journey along the coastal highway that had left me exhilarated and oddly closer to Robert, as if sharing something he had loved. Jonathan and I maintained a strained dance, communicating primarily through formal emails about practical matters. As Patricia had predicted, his initial legal inquiries about contesting the inheritance had fizzled, once attorneys confirmed the solidity of Robert's arrangements. His most recent message, 2 weeks earlier, had been coldly professional, requesting certain family photographs and documents with no personal inquiries about my welfare. I was pruning roses in the front garden when a car I didn't recognize pulled up to the cottage. A woman emerged, tall, professionally dressed with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to managing crisis. She approached with a business card already extended. "Mrs. Campbell, I'm Diane Reeves, Jonathan's assistant. May I speak with you briefly?" Something in her manner, tense, urgent beneath the professional veneer, sent a ripple of concern through me. "Of course. Is everything all right?" She glanced around as if assessing privacy. "Perhaps we could speak inside." In the cottage living room, Diane perched on the edge of the sofa, declining my offer of tea. "Mrs. Campbell, I'm here because Jonathan has experienced some significant setbacks. He asked me to speak with you directly, as he felt you might not take his call." "What kind of setbacks?" I asked, though a sinking feeling suggested I already knew, financial ones primarily. She opened a slim portfolio she'd been carrying. The renovation costs on the penthouse exceeded estimates by nearly double. There were structural issues that couldn't have been anticipated, requiring substantial additional investment. I nodded, unsurprised. Robert had mentioned the building's aging infrastructure years ago, though his suggestions about preventative maintenance had been dismissed as unnecessary expense. Simultaneously, Diane continued, "Jonathan's primary investment failed. He had committed substantial capital to a development project that encountered regulatory obstacles. The details are complex, but essentially he's facing significant losses with limited liquid assets to cover them." "I see." I kept my expression neutral, though part of me had been anticipating something like this. Jonathan had always pursued aggressive investment strategies, preferring dramatic gains over steady growth. "And how does this concern me?" Diane shifted uncomfortably. "Jonathan is facing potential foreclosure on the penthouse. The renovation loans use the property as collateral, and with the investment failure, he cannot meet the payment schedule." "That's unfortunate," I said carefully, "but I'm still not clear on why he sent you to me with this information." She met my gaze directly. "Mrs. Campbell, to be blunt, Jonathan needs financial assistance. He's aware that you have resources that could help him avoid bankruptcy and losing the penthouse." There it was, the request I'd been expecting since the confrontation 3 months ago. Not an apology, not a reconciliation attempt, but a financial appeal delivered through an intermediary to avoid the humiliation of asking directly. "Has Jonathan considered selling the penthouse?" I asked. "Even partially renovated, it would likely cover his debts. He's explored that option," Diane acknowledged. "Unfortunately, in its current state, mid-renovation, the property would sell at a significant loss. Additionally, there are complications with some of the contractors that make a quick sale problematic." Translation: Jonathan had likely alienated the construction team through demanding behavior or payment issues, creating additional obstacles. "I appreciate you coming to explain the situation," I said after a moment. "Please tell Jonathan I've heard his request and will consider it." Diane looked startled by the non-committal response. "Mrs. Campbell, the situation is quite urgent. The foreclosure proceedings could begin within weeks." "I understand," I replied, my tone firm but not unkind, "and I'll need time to consider my response. That's all I can offer today." After showing the clearly dissatisfied assistant out, I sat in my garden thinking about Jonathan's predicament. Robert's letter seemed almost prophetic now. He had anticipated that Jonathan's financial decisions might eventually lead to crisis, creating the very scenario we now faced. The next morning, rather than calling Jonathan immediately, I drove to the city to see the penthouse situation for myself. The building's doorman, recognizing me from my years living there, allowed me up without calling ahead. What I found was sobering. The once elegant home had been gutted to the studs in most areas with exposed wiring and plumbing, creating a hazardous maze. Construction equipment sat abandoned, a fine layer of dust suggesting weeks had passed since any work had been done. Expensive marble and custom fixtures were stacked haphazardly, some already damaged from improper storage. As I carefully picked my way through what had been our home, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for the destruction of spaces that held so many memories, frustration at the obvious waste and mismanagement, and an unexpected sense of gratitude for Robert's foresight in protecting me from depending on Jonathan's financial judgment. I was examining water damage extending from the master bathroom into adjoining rooms when I heard the front door open. "Mom," Jonathan's voice carried through the gutted space. The doorman said, "You were here." He appeared in the doorway, and I was struck by how different he looked from our last encounter. His normally immaculate appearance had slipped. His clothes were still expensive, but slightly rumpled, his face showing the strain of sleepless nights. He'd lost weight, the sharpened angles of his face emphasizing how much he resembled Robert in his more difficult moments. "I wanted to see it for myself," I explained, gesturing to the demolition surrounding us. Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I recognized from his childhood. I assumed Diane spoke with, "You yesterday," I confirmed. She explained your financial situation, and the single word carried a weight of expectation, and I needed to understand the full picture before making any less decisions. I stepped carefully around a pile of discarded fixtures. "This is quite different from what you described when you started the renovations." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Yes. Well, things rarely go as planned in construction or in life, Jonathan," I said gently. "What happened with the past investment project?" Diane mentioned something in my tone must have broken through his defensive posture. He sank down on an overturned bucket, suddenly looking exhausted. "I overextended," he admitted. "The development opportunity seemed guaranteed. Luxury condos in an up-and-coming area. Pre-construction. Sales already strong. I committed not just available capital, but borrowed against other assets, including the anticipated increased value of the penthouse after renovations. And then, environmental review found contamination. Issues that weren't disclosed in the initial site assessment. Remediation costs made the project non-viable. Investors pulled out." He gestured vaguely. The domino effect was comprehensive. I looked around at the destruction surrounding us, both the physical demolition and the wreckage of Jonathan's financial stability. "Why didn't you reach out sooner?" I asked. Before things reached this point, his expression hardened. "After our last conversation, after discovering Dad's manipulation and your role in it, pride, I suppose, or stubbornness, the Campbell family traits. Both powerful motivators," I acknowledged, remembering similar moments of Robert digging in his heels against practical considerations when his pride was at stake. "So, Jonathan," said after a moment, his attempt at casual inquiry undermined by the tension in his voice, "have you made your decision about helping me?" I met his gaze directly. "I'm willing to help, Jonathan, but not unconditionally, and not by simply writing a check to cover your debts." Relief and weariness battled in his expression. "What conditions?" "Well, need to discuss that properly," I replied, picking my way back toward the front door. Not here. Surrounded by the evidence of hasty decisions. Come to Carmel tomorrow. We'll talk about a path forward that addresses both your immediate crisis and the underlying patterns that created it. He looked like he wanted to argue to push for immediate commitment, but necessity overcame impulse. Fine. Tomorrow, as I left the building, the contrast between the ruined penthouse and my peaceful cottage in Carmel couldn't have been starker. Jonathan had received what appeared to be the valuable inheritance, the prestigious address, the visible wealth. I had received what seemed worthless, an abandoned garage, an unknown cottage. Yet here we were, our fortunes dramatically reversed through a combination of Robert's planning and Jonathan's choices. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations and decisions. For tonight, I would return to Carmel, to the home Robert had so thoughtfully created, and consider how best to honor both his concerns and his hopes for our son. Jonathan arrived at the cottage precisely at the agreed time of 11 the next morning, his appearance markedly more polished than the previous day, a deliberate effort, I suspected, to project control he no longer possessed. I had spent the morning preparing, not just mentally, but physically, setting the stage for our conversation with intentional care. You have a lovely view, he commented stiffly as I led him through the cottage to the back patio, where I'd arranged comfortable seating and a light lunch. Your father chose. Well, I agreed. He remembered how much I love the coast. Jonathan's expression tightened at the mention of Robert, but he said nothing as he took the offered seat. The patio overlooked a small but meticulously maintained garden that sloped gently downward, offering glimpses of the Pacific between neighboring properties. The setting was peaceful, private, and neutral ground for the difficult conversation ahead. After pouring us both iced tea, I turned to face my son directly. Before we discuss your financial situation, I'd like to show you something. I handed him a leather portfolio. I prepared that morning, containing selected documents from Robert's records. Jonathan opened it wearily, as if expecting another unwelcome revelation. These are financial projections and maintenance assessments for the penthouse, I explained as he scanned the pages. Your father commissioned them 3 years ago, anticipating eventual major systems failures in the building. The estimates closely match what you've encountered in your renovations. Jonathan frowned. Dad never mentioned any of this. He tried. I corrected gently. Several times you dismissed his concerns as excessive caution, unnecessary expense. He showed you these reports during your last Christmas visit before his diagnosis. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. The boring building assessment he kept bringing up at dinner. The same. I took a sip of my tea. Robert wasn't just being cautious. He was trying to prepare you for exactly the situation you're facing now. Jonathan set the portfolio aside, his jaw tightening. If you've brought me here just to say I told you so on Dad's behalf. I haven't, I interrupted. I'm establishing context for my decision about helping you. Robert saw this coming, not just the building issues, but the pattern of choices that has led to your current crisis. And what pattern is that exactly? His tone was defensive, but I caught genuine confusion beneath it. Prioritizing appearance over substance, I said simply, pursuing impressive gains over sustainable growth, dismissing caution as unnecessary pessimism. I met his gaze directly, the same qualities that led you to throw your mother out of her home rather than consider her needs. Alongside your plans, he had the grace to look momentarily abashed. That was I. Shouldn't have handled it that way. No, I agreed. You shouldn't have. A silence fell between us, filled only by the distant sound of waves and the occasional call of seabirds. Jonathan fidgeted slightly, unused to this directness from me. Throughout his adult life, I had been the mediator, the smoother of rough edges, the one who accommodated his moods and absorbed his dismissals. So, what are you proposing? He finally asked. What are these conditions for your help? First, complete transparency, I replied. I need to see everything, all accounts, debts, contracts, commitments, no hidden liabilities or convenient omissions. He nodded stiffly. Fine. What else? Professional financial management going forward? I continued. You've demonstrated that your judgment in these matters is compromised by impulsivity and overconfidence. Any funds I provide will be structured through trusts with appropriate oversight. His expression darkened. So, I'll be on an allowance. Like a child, like someone who has made serious financial miscalculations and needs guardrails while rebuilding, I corrected. It's not punitive, Jonathan. It's protective of both the assets and yourself. And I suppose you'll be controlling these trusts. Bitterness edged his voice. No, I said, surprising. Him. Independent trustees with fiduciary responsibility. I'm not interested in controlling your life, only in ensuring that help I provide actually leads to sustainable improvement rather than temporary relief. He absorbed this, visibly, struggling between his desperate need for assistance and his resistance to the implied loss of autonomy. What about the penthouse? It's still technically mine. The practical solution would be to sell it, I said, watching his reaction carefully. Even in its current state, it would cover a significant portion of your debts. You could start fresh, perhaps in a more manageable property. Sell it? The idea seemed to genuinely shock him. But it's our family home. We're Dad and you. It's a physical space, Jonathan, I interrupted gently. One that you were eager to gut and transform just months ago. The memories don't reside in the walls. He stood abruptly, pacing the small patio. You don't understand. Selling would be admitting complete failure. Everyone would know. And there, it was, the core of his resistance. Not emotional attachment to our family home, but concern about the public perception of selling it under financial duress. Image over substance yet again. People already know? I said quietly. Construction halted months ago. Contractors have filed liens. The financial community discusses these matters. He stopped pacing, shoulders slumping slightly. I've really destroyed everything, haven't I? The naked vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. For the first time since Robert's death, I glimpsed my son beneath the defensive posturing, confused, overwhelmed, and finally facing the consequences of years of prioritizing appearances over reality. Not everything, I said, my tone softening. But you've created a significant challenge that will require equally significant changes to address. Jonathan sank back into his chair, looking suddenly exhausted. So, what exactly are you offering? A structured way forward? I replied. I'll establish a trust that will satisfy the most pressing creditors and prevent foreclosure. We'll bring in professionals to either complete the renovations appropriately or prepare the penthouse for sale, depending on what makes financial sense after proper assessment. And in return, you agree to financial oversight for a bottom now defined period. You work with a counselor on the underlying patterns that created this situation. And I hesitated, then continued firmly. You make amends for how you treated me after your father's death. His eyes snapped to mine. Amends? What does that mean exactly? It means acknowledging the harm done. It means understanding that relationships have consequences just as financial decisions do. I leaned forward slightly. Jonathan, I'm not offering help purely as a financial transaction. I'm offering it as a mother who believes her son can be better than his recent behavior suggests. Something in my words seemed to penetrate the armor he'd maintained throughout our recent interactions. He looked away, blinking rapidly. I didn't mean what I said that day. He said quietly about you being useless. I was angry and lashing out. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but those words didn't emerge from nowhere. They reflected an attitude toward me, toward older women generally, that you've harbored for some time. He didn't deny it, which represented its own small progress. I need time to think about all this, Jonathan finally said, his tone heavy with a kind of fatigue I had never heard from him before. It's a lot to process. Take the time you need, I replied calmly, though my heart was pounding. But remember, your creditors won't wait for you to find clarity. Some windows close quickly, and once they do, there's no reopening them. An hour later, he left the cottage. No promises made, no conditions agreed to. Yet something lingered in the silence. He left behind a shift so subtle, it might have gone unnoticed if I hadn't been waiting for it all these years. A sliver of honesty, a glimmer of vulnerability between us that had been absent for far too long. That evening, twilight spread across Carmel, laying a soft hush over the garden. I sat alone among Robert's roses, the air fragrant, the ocean beyond the hills fading into night. I wondered what Robert would think of my words, of my stance. Had I been too unyielding, too merciful? There was no way to know. But for the first time in years, I felt balanced, no longer the enabling mother, no longer the cautious negotiator. Just me. Clear, uncompromising, honest. The future was uncertain. Jonathan could still reject my conditions out of pride, or accept them with resentment lodged like a thorn in his heart. But whatever came next would be grounded in truth. No masks, no illusions. And in that, I believed Robert would see the wisdom of his plan not in dividing assets, but in forcing us both to face who we truly were. Spring came to Carmel in full bloom, the garden erupting in impossible color against the endless blue of the Pacific. 9 months had passed since Robert's death, 6 since I had opened the garage and uncovered its secrets, and 4 since Jonathan's financial collapse drove him to my doorstep. 4 months that had rewritten the story of us. 3 days after our uneasy conversation, Jonathan had called with words I never expected. "I'll do it. All of it. Whatever it takes." The journey since then was anything but simple. Accountants unearthed debts darker than he had confessed. Lawyers charted a labyrinth of entanglements. The penthouse became both sacrifice and salvation. Renovated, sold, its proceeds feeding the hungriest creditors. But the harder battle was not financial. It was within Jonathan himself. Therapy sessions he had once mocked began breaking open walls. Slowly, painfully, insight crept in where arrogance had lived. One afternoon, as I clipped roses at the garden gate, I saw his car roll into the drive. He stepped out with a small package in his hands. He looked different, less polished, less armored. A short beard softened his sharpness, making him look achingly like Robert when we were young. "The garden looks amazing," he said, kissing my cheek. It was no longer perfunctory. It was warm, real. We carried our coffee to the patio, slipping easily into the rhythm of our new monthly ritual. He told me the penthouse closing was near, and that the final price would exceed even the best projections. Relief rippled through me. Then, cautiously, he offered something more. A new job, community development, affordable housing, work that once would have seemed beneath him. His voice carried an unfamiliar fire as he explained. "It feels meaningful, Mom. It's not about squeezing every dollar. It's about building something that lasts." I studied him, listening to the pride that didn't come from profit but from purpose. "Your father would be pleased," I said. He believed true competence belonged in service of something greater than oneself. Jonathan's eyes softened. Then he slid the package across the table. Inside was Robert's collection of cufflinks and tie pins. "I thought these connected me to Dad," he admitted quietly. "But they don't. They're just things." Beneath them lay a velvet pouch, my wedding band, lost in the chaos of the penthouse, now found, and with it, an envelope in Robert's hand. The note inside was brief. The first band was a promise of the life we would build. This one celebrates the life we created. All my love, always. Tucked inside was a jeweler's receipt, dated weeks before Robert's final hospitalization, an eternity band meant for our 45th anniversary. Jonathan placed a small box in my palm. When I opened it, sapphires and diamonds shimmered against the afternoon light, scattering tiny rainbows across the patio table. "Oh, Robert." My voice broke as I slipped the new ring beside the old one. Gold for beginnings, stones for the journey complete. Jonathan said nothing. He didn't need to. Respect and tenderness radiated in his silence. For the first time in years, his gaze held no calculation, no judgment, only love. "Thank you," I whispered. Before leaving, he paused at the garden gate. "Whatever happened to those cars, Mom? The ones Dad left you?" I smiled, remembering the Aston Martin's silver sheen against the California coast. "I kept the Aston. Robert would have loved knowing I drive it sometimes. The others will be sold, one fund for financial education, the rest for your future children." "Future children?" he echoed, half amused. "That's optimistic." "Your father was always an optimist," I replied. "He believed people could grow if given the chance." As his car disappeared down the road, I breathed in the sea air, feeling the weight of the years settle into something lighter. Robert's unconventional plan, so cruel in appearance, had given me security and given our son a chance at redemption. Not every scar had healed, not every pattern had vanished. But the foundation was different now. Respect where there had been dismissal, truth where there had been silence. That evening, I slipped behind the wheel of the Aston Martin. The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. I took the coastal road as the sun melted into gold over the horizon. On my hand, the plain band of beginnings and the jeweled circle of completion gleamed side by side. "You were right, Robert," I said into the wind, "about so many things." The garage key, once a symbol of humiliation, had unlocked more than hidden wealth. It had opened a door to legacy, to healing, to courage. And as the Pacific shimmered beside me and the car surged forward, I understood. It had unlocked my future.